It is Obstructed View, the podcast where we talk Baylor, Big 12, some Cowboys, all kinds of things. And as you can see, Cam Stuart, my old radio cohort who left me recently in a bitter divorce, no, it's somewhat amicable, actually, and he is relocated to Chicago, where he still does work for Rogue. He has refused to come back to the radio show, the Matt Mosley show, but that's okay. We're still undergoing negotiations. I'm sure he'll extract more money from M&M Broadcasting at some point. Cam, and thank you for you're under the weather today, as people might be able to tell, although you just power through these things. So you were taking some Vicks formula or whatever that was right before the show. So thanks for powering through. Very appreciative to have you here on Obstructed View. And Cam, you can hear Cam on his Locked On Baylor podcast. In fact, if we make some salient points today, hopefully Cam can use some of this material as well. So hello to that massive Locked On podcast window out there, that audience, because after those post-game things, you're doing big numbers, and excited for you on that front as the Locked On continues to come after everybody in my family. In fact, Glenn Stretch Smith now, I have to wait for him to finish his Locked On Cowboy stuff before he can come on with me. So they're just haunt me from every turn. Okay, let's since you and you did, I'm sure, an immediate thing after the Texas Bowl. I was there, and then of course had the whole post game with Dave. I guess we've had this happen a couple times this season. There's a couple of ways we can think about this. I think overall it's a bummer to not finish the season well. Where that game was headed, which was like a massive beatdown, was 28-7, kind of like that BYU game in Waco. Mm-hmm. I guess compared to where it was headed, the fact that the Bears kind of fought back and hung in there to a certain extent was, made you feel a little bit better about things. There were some weird calls. There was an injury that hurt the Bears, obviously, with Bryson Washington. Cam, I was double-checking that injury today. Dave said after the game it was a head injury. I'm not saying that's good news. I guess the silver lining in that kind of news is we hated not to have him, but generally, unless it's something just completely out of the ordinary, that means he'll be fine for the spring. I don't think he has a history of concussions that I've heard about, and so I think he'll be able to come back. I think from people that could see, and maybe you saw this on TV, Cam, he threw down his gloves. There was that report. He was very upset, when they ruled him that he couldn't play, and obviously they were doing the best thing for him and his future. But it did not help Baylor in any way. Cam, I want to get your thoughts. I would just say that, 44-31 loss. I thought Sawyer had his good moments. I think Dave's told us when he's at his worst is when he gets kind of happy feet and he's kind of feeling the rush, maybe even before it's there. And I did see some of that, the early pick six. Kim, I would just say on that particular play, I just thought he fired it, and maybe again he felt the rush, but I thought he fired it. Bryson, again, I think we want him to catch that ball, but my thought in the moment, and maybe you saw some more replays of it, Cam, was that he just didn't put any touch on that ball. He fired it in there, and then you had the carom, and then you had the pick six, and it just felt like at that point, oh my gosh, you're just getting hit with a wave. Is that kind of what you thought about that particular play? And even I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on Sawyer's overall play in that game.
Yeah, Sawyer, like you said, he made some throws. He missed some throws. I wouldn't call it a career day or anything for Sawyer. In fact, I'll go to a couple throws in the first quarter where he's looking for Hal Presley down the field, and he just misses him. Presley's got a beat. There's two of them, and they're both off by 7 to 10 yards. And you've watched enough of this, excuse me, the Spavital offense. And of course, with the Bryles offense, it was the same way. You have a couple of those every game. There's a lot of option routes for this team. And so you just have a couple of those miscommunications. You throw it to a dead spot. Then they had a couple more of them throughout the game. And you're like, all right, this is this is off a little bit here. And you're absolutely right on the pick six. It's an overthrow. I mean, he's just putting too much on it. And I think that's obviously a key play in the game. It's a pick six. And another key play in the game was the Ashton Hawkins touchdown, no touchdown, might have been a touchdown. That was on fourth down, and Sawyer's got him. He's open. And he just hums that thing, man. It's coming in, like a rocket, and it's probably a bit too high, and it's got too much heat on it. So Hawkins has to reach back, and it makes the toe tap nearly impossible. And although he does kind of toe tap, but according to the rule, whatever. But those are two crucial plays in the game where Sawyer is not missing the guy per se, like in the conventional sense, but he's just putting too much on it. And that's one where you're like, it's an easy one to fix when you're looking at it on tape. But yeah, Sawyer was not his best day. He throws for 445, but that doesn't tell the story. And you were absolutely right about the happy feet too. I mean, you saw that plenty of points in the game. They're driving before the half where they do end up scoring. Had a goal to go situation, ended up kicking a field goal, but there was a play before they get to goal to go where Sawyer's really sped up and he's trying to just use his arm strength to get a ball there to the boundary, and it should have been picked off. It was deflected by the defender. And that's where he's just relying a bit too much on his arm talent, which is good, not great. But when he's playing calm and using his mechanics, he's really tough to stop. But he wasn't the only issue in this game, but certainly if he had his best game or was on his A game, I think this could have been a different story. But in retrospect, it looks like at the point of the pick six, or maybe more accurately, the point of Bryson going down, the game's pretty much over. I think it's only 14-7, maybe 21-7 when he goes down. But at that point, you're down 2 touchdowns and you're down your bell cow running back. And there you cannot exploit LSU's biggest weakness that you could, which was your run game versus their run defense, worst run defense in the SEC. And you had a real opportunity to pounce on that. So maybe that's over at 14-0, and it's tough to establish the run after that. But certainly after Bryson goes down, as good as Pendergrass is as a complimentary back, it's when you're down 2 scores and that's your lead back, it's real tough.
I get that Dave loves going for it on fourth down. They had trouble converting on fourth down in this game, and it's going to happen from time to time. And I didn't have a huge problem. I think there was part of me that wanted to see them get within that touchdown when they had a chance to make it 24-17, I think it was. Would have been nice, but then I think you're thinking, well, we haven't really stopped. I mean, like, they got some takeaways, but what's kind of always weird when you're calling defensive plays is I don't think Dave trusted his own defense there. It's kind of like, well, we're down here. We need to get more than a field goal. And it's not like he's the only one doing it. Dan Lanning does that a ton. Other coaches are like, I think the old NFL sort of thought process is you've got to make it a 1-score game there. You got, I mean, even if it's 4th and 1, even if you're Sean Payton, like, go ahead and make it, whatever, because Baylor had kind of climbed back into the game against all odds. They kind of slowed things down. Now, I may have that wrong. I think it would have gotten to 34-27. Okay. Not 30. Yeah.
Sounds right. Yeah.
So there's that. And again, there's no team, and I see other teams do it, but I don't think any teams like Baylor, in the sense that while Spavital really came on and helped Sawyer, and the two of them helped each other, this whole 3rd and 11, 3rd and 8, just constant, like, it kind of becomes predictable. I know what they're doing. It's an obvious pass situation. The box, there's not enough people in the box, and so they just immediately check into a run. If that's even a check into it, they may just decide, hey, we're going to run this. We're going to run the ball here. And while it puts them in 4th and manageable, it just sets up a lot of, like, 4th down plays. It's a strange way to go about business. So that's one thing I noticed. The other thing is this, and this kind of leads to us talking a little bit about the future of the program. If Dave is going to make a change on the staff, I think it would be with whoever's kind of in charge of something like safeties and cornerbacks. And while they have some talented players, and let's remember Snacks Johnson was not in this game because of academics, which is a strange, you don't usually see a team sort of announce that, like, okay, we got a couple of players out because of academics.
A couple of senior starters, by the way.
Steve Linton, edge rusher, and Snacks, and they were out because of academics. Snacks would have helped.
Yep. And no Corey Gordon either, different reason, obviously.
Yeah, Corey Gordon went in the portal. I hated that. You know how much I loved him.
So 2 guys you're not having next year anyway.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So the Caden Jenkins, we came into the season thinking that was Baylor's best cover player. Honestly, it just didn't, and maybe he'll bounce back and be fine. I think they ended up paying him quite a bit of money to stay, and I just think if you're going to fire somebody, and Kevin Curtis is the cornerbacks coach, and I don't want to come on here like fire this guy, fire that guy, because I loved how they came back as a team this year. But Dave was very upfront about how they never improved in that area. They did not improve enough in the secondary. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of a Powledge area. That is a Kevin Curtis area. If I'm missing a safeties coach, you let me know. But
could it also be a Dave Aranda area?
Absolutely. I think Dave is probably, I think he's proud of a lot of things, the fight, this and that, all those things he likes to talk about. But I think if he's embarrassed about something, it is that they didn't turn the corner as a secondary. And I think he's got to decide was that on me or did I not have the right people helping me back there coaching the secondary? Because they didn't get better. And in that game, Caden Jenkins, who, let's not act like, I mean, again, kind of had a iffy year.
Mm-hmm. Very up and down. Yep. And
he just got burned. They had to get him out of that game. In fact, I saw him back there like in the fourth quarter. I'm like, wait, what is he doing back out there? The guy that killed him, what was that guy's name? Hilton Jr., Mike Hilton Jr.,
yeah.
Chris Hilton, Chris Hilton Jr. I'm thinking about somebody who used to play for the Colts. But yeah, yes. This guy just crushed him. And when you see a receiver having just a world-beating day, you look him up, right? Like, okay, what's this guy done this season? Cam, he had like 200 yards on the whole season. The guy had not
130. He was hurt, but yes, 130 yards. Okay. Yeah.
In the games he did play, he did not do much.
Yeah.
And he killed Baylor and he killed Jenkins in this. So I guess, yeah, I kind of want your take on how do you think Dave will respond to his secondary being one of the main reasons they ended up losing 5 games this year?
And I want to go back to that Aranda quote he had after the game about the secondary. So I found very interesting about it was you said, they never turned the corner. And the way he presents it is we had a bunch of question marks coming into this year. And pretty much all the rest of them turned the corner, right? Mm-hmm. Quarterback got answered, big check, not the way you were expecting, but yes. Run game, big check. Offensive line, huge question mark, huge check mark after the year. Linebacker core, you put a JUCO guy in there as a starter, he becomes an all Big 12 guy. A pass rush never got there. Well, it actually regressed throughout the year, but defensive backs, that's where we were feeling good, Sure, some growing pains. They're still young. But at this point in the Texas Bowl, we're talking about for some of these sophomores, that's 25 games, 20 games. We're not using the inexperience thing anymore. And I think that was where it's really, really disappointing for Dave. And he did mention it throughout the year. And I wonder how that power structure looks on the defensive staff. You had have a guy in Powledge who's still the DC, not the play caller, but the DC. Looked like he would have been a finalist for the Sam Houston job. He doesn't get it. Aranda admits that the defense wasn't great this year. It looked like it had turned a corner the last few weeks against a horrible Houston offense and a pretty good Kansas offense. They played really well in both those games, held both of them under 20. But I think you need to take a look at this if you're Dave Aranda and thinking, am I because I thought before this season that my best position was to call the defense and to be the maestro of this defense. Is that still the case? Are my guys like Curtis and Powledge still in the right spots that we thought before this year? Do I need to look to the outside the way I did, on the offensive side last year while keeping all those defensive guys, save Jamar Chaney? I think it's interesting to look at the power structure there and also the way they've looked at the portal. They've brought in a couple defensive backs, so I think have plenty of upside, but they all play safety. Devin Turner, the all Big Ten guy from Northwestern, just down the road from me. That's a good pickup, but he's a safety. You usually see that the transition the other way around. Corners going to safety in the NFL because they can't cover, not safeties going to corner. So that's a position they need to focus in on in the portal. And it might not be this month. It might be the spring window when there are guys at big time programs who thought they were going to start and then they don't. They're number 2 on the depth chart in the spring game. But that's a position they need to address because, we see Caden Jenkins as their best corner and LSU saw him as a weak link. I mean, they saw him and said, that's the matchup we're going to go after. We're going to get him isolated and we're going to beat him the same way Colorado did. And to think of those two games 3 months apart and to be able to exploit that both times, it's disappointing.
Yeah, I think it is. And, I would say of the losses in the portal, Corey Gordon Jr. is the biggest one because it's like he had the makings of kind of a poor man's Petrie, just in the way he played. And again, Jalen Petrie is one of the best defensive players in the history of Baylor. So I'm not saying he was going to get there. But even like that guy who made the huge play in the Sugar Bowl and brought it back like 95 yards for a touchdown that ended up going to Arkansas.
Al Walcott.
Like Corey had a pinch. He had a way about a knack for getting turnovers. In fact, he had 3 interceptions this year, and he loved contact. He liked getting up near the line of scrimmage. And so I just think he was a versatile player for Dave. Now, again, he's left for whatever reasons. I was saddened because I knew some of his family members, and they told me that Corey and his family were going to be at the bowl game to support the Bears. And I don't think he loves the idea of leaving. But I think these guys have a lot of pressure on him. I think if Alabama, I think he was going to go look at Cal Berkeley. Somebody told me, and there was one other. I'm
talking about opposite ends of the spectrum in the classroom.
Yeah, I know. But I think if you're making whatever $50,000 at Baylor or 75, and somebody's ready to pay you $300 or $400, it's hard not to go take that. Hard to not go in the portal and think about that. So the thought is moving forward for the Bears. I don't know what they do exactly to address that from a coaching standpoint. If you think about it, Dave did hold the offensive staff accountable last year and kind of blew everybody out on that side of the ball. Defensive staff, he did not do that too, and brought guys back. And I say that there were a few guys that were gone, but he brought some new people. But I mean, think what Dave was doing this year. Not only does he think that secondary is like a huge strength for him. Here's what it's sad that didn't work. Because what I really think Dave is great at, and he didn't show up in this game, sadly, is finding a way to bring pressure and bring all these playmakers. And he brought Gary Patterson in to help him and give him feedback in the secondary. Because if there's anything that Patterson, and he's one of the great defensive coaches really in all of college football over the past 25 years, really what Patterson's strength was being brilliant in how he played the back end. Sadly, I just don't think those two guys totally were on the same page. And so, he had to exit stage left. Gary did. And I hate that didn't work because if you think about it, then that ended up being a huge problem throughout the season is they couldn't turn the corner in the secondary. Can they do it? Probably so. Now, moving forward, let's think about what you do have. I mean, one of the best returning running backs in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best returning quarterbacks. If you're talking about preseason all-conference, I bet they give it to Sam Leavitt because he played in the title game, played well at times, seems to be getting a lot of buzz.
But we know.
Yeah, we know. So you're great at – and receiver-wise, you do have Josh Cameron coming back. And, you know, I think you're going to be okay at your skill positions for sure.
Michael Trigg as well, you know, not a receiver, but a big-time playmaker coming back, probably.
Yeah, I mean, unless obviously he is an NFL guy, and
correct,
if somebody
there
convinces
is that.
him he'll go in the top 3 rounds, then he'll probably go. I unless I've missed it, I don't really feel like the portal has addressed the O-line much. They certainly have hit the D-line. Wide receiver, the guy from Alabama, Prentice, in some other areas, safety we know about. I mean, I think you have to continue to churn in and bring in, nasty offensive linemen. I think the best thing about this, one of the best things about this season was that an offensive line went from like not getting it done and, oh my gosh, it's another season of not having a run game to literally like where Colton, like the center, I think you noted this. I think you texted it to me. Like the center's like talking trash. I mean, like they're snarly dudes. So Betty and the whole crew, Fugar, these guys
they
like
were bullying teams, man. They were bullying teams.
Yeah,
in that win streak.
They got nasty. So, So I mean, there's some great things that are coming back. I just think first of all, Cam, I would just say you have to learn from failures of the past. And that is they got caught flat-footed after 2021 because we don't have to get all into that. I mean, Dave was not prepared for NIL. I think it wasn't just Dave. It was a lot of people at the school weren't ready to pounce and capitalize, and they came up short in that area. Portal, NIL, the whole thing. The Bears were not ready. Now they've retrenched. They're better in that area. They've got a great recruiter in Keenan. I just think, boy, they have to. They've had a nice recruiting class, 2025. This has to be the mentality, Cam, of like zero complacency, zero like, hey, had a pretty good season, had a pretty good turnaround. We should be a lot better next season. Like, if there's any of that thought, they've got to get it out. And I thought one weird thing that came up in the postgame was Dave acting like some outside stuff. And I kind of want to get your take on this because you're good on this kind of thing. I don't know what exactly he was saying, like the outside noise. First of all, Dave seems to ignore all of that. He doesn't like doing media, doesn't care about it, doesn't really seem to hear it, but seemed to indicate that, at least to his players, some of the hype impacted them. Isn't that strange that he seems to be completely separated from all of that, yet he seems to have a pulse for that his players are not separated from that. So some of the things that he's great at doing, like keeping them focused and keeping them playing hard when they were 2-4, but he admits that he can't keep them from the hype. And that's funny to me because I thought everybody was excited at Baylor, but it's not like I didn't feel like the rest of the country or anybody was giving Baylor a bunch of hype. So that response was interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's something he talked about early in the season too. I don't know if he used quite that language at the beginning of the year, but it was more like, well, I think we made this to be too much. I think he said it before after the BYU game, which this game reeked a lot of that BYU game. Not ready to play, dug yourselves a hole. And honestly, they had some luck in that BYU game that they didn't have in this LSU game. They made a bunch of mistakes. But yeah, I thought about that quote a lot after the game because I remember thinking like, on the one hand, this is a team that a lot of these guys haven't played in a quote unquote big bowl game, which the Texas Bowl is not the Cotton Bowl, but you're playing an SEC team. You're not 6-6. Neither are they. There's something to that. But on the other hand, when he says the moment is too big for us in the Texas Bowl, it's like, what are the ambitions of a program like that? You know what I mean? And I know I've heard it all week in the comments section. Baylor's not LSU. They're not Ohio State. They're not Texas in sort of that, expectation of a program. We're not going into a season thinking they're going to win a national championship. But still, I think we should be somewhere between that and not thinking the Texas Bowl is too big a moment. And Dave hyped this up himself too, to be honest. I mean, I don't find anything wrong with that. But he said after this matchup was announced, he said, our guys are excited. This is a chance for us to hunt for some respect. We know what the world thinks of the SEC. They love taking on an SEC team. It's a way for us to prove that we can hang with these guys and get some respect. And so he's the one sort of putting it out there that, hey, this is a big moment for us. And that should be okay. A coach should be able to say that and not have to say 3 weeks later, well, the moment was a bit too big for us, because it certainly did look that way. But it's also an interesting one to look at for next year, because I think there will be expectations within the Baylor fan base. I don't know how much that will spread out, because the Big 12 will be up for grabs, and they weren't ranked at any point this year. So it's not like Paul Feinbaum's going to be talking about how Baylor should win the Big 12. But I think there's going to be that expectation in fans and within those walls of, we need to be in the thick of this. We've got the talent to be in the thick of this. We showed the back half of last year that we deserve to be in the thick of this. And, you look at Arizona State, don't know what BYU brings back. Obviously, Colorado gets stripped a lot. Iowa State brings a decent amount back. And then Baylor and Kansas State should be right in that discussion too. So if you can't handle the hype of a Texas Bowl, who knows what happens if you dare go 2-0 and beat Auburn and CFP runners SMU the next week, because then the hype comes. Then you've got a number next to your name, and then you've got expectations. So it's going to need to be something that they handle quickly. And I mean, hopefully it's something they learn from this game.
Yeah, I hope they don't listen to Lane Kiffin when he says that, the SEC's on a different planet, and the Bears, nobody in the Big 12 really even deserves to be on the field.
Look what they did to Duke, man. Look what they did to mighty Duke.
Yeah. Yeah, he's feeling pretty good about things, and all you have to do is go back to the Baylor Sugar Bowl, and then Texas Tech played them in a bowl game, and the two Big 12 teams both crushed Ole Miss. 121-7, one was like 42-20 something,
they did not get within 2 scores of either game.
No. So some of that's ridiculous. Okay, really enjoyed that, Cam. Last thing, because I think you and I both have a similar level of. I mean, we love the football, but I don't know if there's any two people in the media, especially in Baylor media, that watched. And one just retired, by the way. One of the big basketball writers just retired over there. Kendall, we wish him the best, although I've kind of thought after he thanked about 75 people, the Mosley name might show up in there. But
maybe.
I'm kidding. Kendall's a nice guy. I like Kendall. But he's kind of a hoops head, kind of, lawyer type guy. I don't know. I don't know in recent years if I've ever had less feel for a team going into conference. There are parts of this team that excite me. They're a borderline elite offensive rebounding team. They do seem to have some desire in that area. At times, they look really good on offense. They should have a bunch of shooters, and yet they don't. I mean, they sort of will go in these funks. I mean, I guess I kind of remember it from last year, and they generally can come out of it. But man, I would hate to start another Big 12 slate. I mean, Utah just looked horrific. So I think we kind of have to throw that out. Give the Bears credit for putting them away, but I thought that was like, Arlington Baptist or somebody coming in. I mean, poor Miro. I mean, that was sad. I thought they should have at least like just got out of the way and let him make a layup or something in his time back. But I just don't know what to make of this team because I mean Rob is arguably he's kind of like their best pure guard from just
You make that argument, yeah.
facilitating, and he's good at scoring and he's good in the paint. Like he does a lot of great things, and I don't know yet if we truly have a feel for like VJ's unreal athlete, but you know, we gotta see how he fits in this offense when you start playing real teams. And boy, that happens tomorrow as we record this on Friday. They go to Iowa State, and that's not an easy. That's a tough ramp up to go from the Utah, just a silly little team that showed up. Craig, somebody coaches them, and it's just like, guys, thanks for showing up. You're going to be the dregs of this conference. And then you go to number 3, Big TJ running that thing into Ames. That is a monster step up in competition. And I don't know how this is going to go. I mean, because it's a team that in the past has given the Bears some fits. They have crushed the Baylor in rebounding at times. I especially remember that one time in the conference tournament where Scott, that's about as mad as I've ever seen him. The Bears did beat them at the at Foster last year in a crazy, and at the game that Scott got kicked out of. Yeah.
That was the one. Survived to 20-0 and still won.
There's a lot. Oh, that was wild. Yeah, they lost that lead. Jacobs, then he calmed everything and it led them to a victory.
Got him a job. Yeah.
How are you feeling about this team as they get ready for their first real conference game?
Oh, man, I wish I had more conviction about it. You know how excited I was about this roster and the makeup, even though I was like, I just don't know about not having that backup, that real true backup center in there, even just to give you 5 minutes a game. They still don't have that. Norchad is a good small ball 5. But for all the excitement I had of this roster, I think the deficiencies we've seen so far worry me more. And the main thing is I don't know what their identity is. They've tried to be a man defense again. It hasn't really worked, and you can hold your own playing zone defense. I don't know how far it gets you in the tournament, as we saw with Jim Boeheim's teams for a long time. I think his teams underachieved a lot, and I don't know where they are offensively. They had at least a defined identity offensively the last 5-6 years, even when the defense wasn't going there. The high ball screen, the 3-point shooting was elite each of the last 5 or 6 seasons, and they're not really great at that. Their most explosive player is not a 3-point shooter. I mean, you could argue their 2 best players at any given time, Edgecombe and Norchad, are not 3-point shooters. I don't know where they're at defensively. And I see a team like Iowa State that is longer and just as athletic, if not more athletic than them. And I don't love their odds. And there's a lot of teams in the Big 12 that can say that. Their next game, I think, is Cincinnati, which is just a dogfight of a team. I mean, they are just so gritty. We saw that with them last year. They hung with Baylor pretty well in that game at the Foster. And I see that a team like that's really gritty, that can take you out of the things that you do best. And they got some guys that can create their own shots, like Edgerrin James' son there, Jizzle. And I look at how many of those teams there are in the Big 12, and I just don't know where Baylor stands against those teams yet, be it Cincinnati, Houston, Iowa State. Kansas is obviously Kansas. And then you look at some of the back half of that Big 12. West Virginia's already beaten Gonzaga and Kansas this year. Mm-hmm. Colorado beat UConn this year. There's not, I mean, I know it's cliche, but there's no easy nights in this conference. And if there are, you already had one of the two. You already played Utah. Okay. You look at those games against Cincinnati, BYU, Iowa State, Houston. It's a dogfight. And I just got to see what this team's dog is. So right now, I'm not picking them to be in the top 2 or 3 in the Big 12 off what we've seen so far. But I think their high-end talent could get them there if they find an identity.
Yeah, right. And hopefully Rob can function and I haven't seen really any moment that's too big for him yet.
That's good sign,
and
yeah.
I think he'll be okay in Ames. I found that interesting, by the way, that Spatola, we joke about Spatola,
Our friend,
but he
yeah.
called the game the other night, and they love pointing out that he played at Army as if that's some kind of huge badge of honor. I mean, playing basketball at Army, but most of us didn't even know they had a program, but still, he made an interesting point, and the reason I find it interesting is because if there's one thing he knows, and I actually think he's a pretty good basketball knowledge guy, but he certainly knows Duke. And his father-in-law was the longtime coach. He married Coach K's daughter, in case you didn't know. And he said something interesting. He, in a weird sort of way, he took a poke at Roach. And his poke was, and he wasn't trying to be mean, but he was kind of like, they've always waited for that next level. There's always been that waiting for a next level for Jeremy Roach. And I think that's a way of him saying he didn't think that Jeremy had ever lived up to his to whatever the standards, expectations. Now, that said, he was like a 2-time captain at Duke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not act like, oh my gosh, Roach was a bad player. To your point, like if you're going to get an identity, it would be nice for someone in that group of guards, whether it be Jay Nunn, Rob, VJ, somebody kind of needs to be the lead dog, because they only have one dog right now.
Yep.
And it's Norchad. And Norchad is kind of a AC type, gathers vital, kind of like, okay, I'll go to battle. I mean, I hope you all come in here with me, but I'm going to fight whoever we're fighting. Somebody else has got to get in the fight, and somebody else has to kind of separate and become that scorer. Cam, appreciate you, man, playing through some illness, some off-the-field issues.
Battling through.
But I think that'll be great. I think what will really help the flu is to go sit outside at Wrigley. I think
it's only
that's
10. It's only 10 degrees.
I think that's what the doctor ordered for really getting you, because then it's going to turn into pneumonia. You probably didn't get a flu shot, which is part of the issue.
Of course not.
And you didn't get any vaccines. I know you're an anti-vaxxer.
Big time. I don't want to get taken off YouTube here.
All right. No. Thank you, Cam. And we didn't even mention the rest of the CFP, but we'll leave that for another time.
Sure.
I appreciate you being on this episode of Obstructed View. And if I'm allowed to be on Locked On Baylor at all, I just want to say hello to that audience, and would love for y'all to cross over and join me from time to time. Thank you, Cam.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Always good to be back. And for Locked On, we do have to keep it under 30 minutes. So that makes the Mosley cameo very tricky. So
okay, so that was a statement of Mosley will not be appearing on Locked On. That's fine. There he goes, Cam Stuart, my long time radio cohort, coming to us from Chicagoland. It has been the Obstructed View podcast. Good night, everybody.
We are Rogue Media Sports.